Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Money Wisdom Podcast. Today we are very glad, we are very honoured to have Mr. Lee Soo Chai, who is the managing partner of Weiss Retail LLP, a heritage, I always want to say this, a heritage law firm, because this law firm has been around for more than a century. It is 111 years old this year. So we are very happy to have Soo Chai to come and join us for this podcast. Soo Chai and the rest of his colleagues are actually our sort of legal partners, in that whenever we have got issues that we need legal help, especially with regard to issues like succession, wealth planning, setting up of a trust, we always bring our clients to Soo Chai and his colleagues. And I would say that, so far we are very happy to have them advise our clients. So today we are very glad to have him join us on this episode regarding the value of advice. So, Soo Chai, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris, for having me. And hi, everyone.
Okay, so we have got some questions for you, Soo Chai. I know I have sent you those questions and prep you, but along the way, I may throw you a spanner and and deviate a bit off those questions. So maybe you
Sounds
like to...
a bit like court,
Okay, then I'm sure you have no problem. I'm sure you'll do very, very well. My questions are definitely not as difficult as what you get in the courts. So maybe you can start first by sharing with all of us some of the money beliefs that you grew up with. Maybe share a bit about your family, the kind of family that you grew up in, okay, and some of the money beliefs that maybe your parents have imparted to you. You had a glimpse of what your parents they have done with regard to money. I'm sure you took away some of these money values. So maybe you'd like to share with all of us.
Yeah, sure. I grew up where Clarke Quay is at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, along the river.
My father-in-law grew up there as well.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. A lot of Teochews.
Yes, Teochews, yeah.
Yeah, and then a lot of coolies,
yes.
warehouses.
Warehouses, tongkangs. And the river smells at low tide. The water is okay at high tide. Many of my neighbors with their kids will be jumping into the river at high tide.
Right.
And some of them are being pulled along by the tongkangs, as they swim in the middle of the river. But my mom, in her wisdom, I suppose, did not allow me to participate in those fun activities. Though I only remember one incident when I jumped into the river, but it was just for a short while. Our family was not considered a rich family. I think my father was a hawker along Cluny Road, where I think the Singtel Com Center now is.
Yeah, that's where Cluny Kopitiam started. That stretch there's a Cluny Kopitiam.
Yeah, there's a Cluny Kopitiam there. And so he has a store there selling vegetables. My mom also has a little... along the road, there was a little pop-up kind of store that we established there also. So on weekends, sometimes I have to go and help out.
Right.
We live in Clarke Quay, right? So my father will have his tricycle. And I remember going up Penang Road. There's an upslope down there, up there. And I will have to get down and push the tricycle, which is laden with vegetables on some of the days.
Right.
Actually, Chris, I have not related this for decades. And your question brought back a lot of fond memories.
How many brothers or sisters do you have?
I have one sister, younger sister, and one younger brother who passed away.
I'm so sorry.
20 years ago already. Wow, it's been such a long time. So in terms of money belief, my father was very frugal. I can remember at one stage when I first started work, I see people investing in houses and all these sort of things. And I sense that actually I have quite a lot of reticence about making those investments. And I think partly it is the values that he has in relation to savings and use of money probably was imbibed in me, whether consciously or unconsciously.
Right.
Spend within your means.
Right.
Don't overspend.
That was your father? I mean...
That was my father.
And I'm sure your mother as well.
My mother, yes.
Okay.
Yes. and do not borrow.
I think this particular money values is quite common amongst our parents.
Yeah.
But nowadays, we don't see that.
When I first started work, I said, wow, how can you not borrow? I want my car, but I'm not going to be able to afford a car. He bought me a car, actually.
Your father?
My father.
Wow.
He bought me a car when I was, I think, my first year of practice.
He must be so proud that his son became a lawyer.
His second-hand car, I still remember, it's a Nissan. And I remember the number. Well, now you bring back a lot of fond memories, And he paid cash. 30 over 1,000. He paid cash.
Are you the eldest?
I'm the eldest,
Okay.
yes.
So I suppose he was very proud of you.
I'm
being
sure he was.
being the 长子, the eldest. And now the eldest son, at least during their time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, being a lawyer, even today, being a lawyer is something that the parents are very proud of. And so out of that happiness, and he was so proud, he bought you your first car.
I never thought very much of it until you ask all these questions, bring up a lot of memories, good memories. And, when you ask the question, what are my beliefs about money? And reflecting on why do you spend money? Why do you spend 30 over 1,000 to pay in full for the car? Right? And as I reflect on this, it is a reflection of his value. And he says, don't borrow. Right?
He modeled it for you to see that he didn't borrow.
Yes.
So frugality is one of the money beliefs that you grew up with. Are there other things that you have seen from your parents that in a way today it shaped your money values, your own money values?
I think investment in a good education. I think that is. We didn't have a lot of money, right, to sort of invest in stocks and things like this. But I remember there was times when interest rate was more than 10%. I remember some FD slips that
I remember that.
where he does save. He does save. He puts them in FDs and things like this. And I think he's a very, very safe kind of guy when it comes to dealing with money.
So
I wouldn't call it investment. I don't know whether it's investment.
Savings. It's a savings. But so that means he's pretty conservative.
Yes.
Who's a better saver? Your mother or your father? Or
My mother is a lot more outgoing than my father, and but my mother is very entrepreneurial, right? So she does squirrel away money.
Okay.
And she's also is of the type who will not spend beyond her means, and but she's not afraid to give money and help other people.
Right. So that's interesting because a lot of people, when I talk to them, their parents, right, they will always say the father is the one that is, well, if they are entrepreneurs, the father is the one that's more entrepreneurial. The father is always the one that is working, right? And then he makes the money and then he will pass the money to the wife, right? And then the wife is always the one that saves, right? I mean, that's the case for my family. The women, they are better savers, so they tend to save up for the family. But in your case, it seems a bit different.
I think very different. My wife is a saver.
Okay.
So I pass all my whole paycheck to her. She manages all the money.
You don't say that because a lot of wives will be, you just spoil the market. My wife, if she hears this, she'll say, you see, I'm such a good wife because I don't pass my entire paycheck to my wife. I give her a portion and then she manages that for the family. So please don't say that.
But she doesn't, she wishes it's not like this because then she has a responsibility.
It's a burden.
Yeah. But my motivation is it gives her confidence.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So there's another story which I share with younger couples. Mel and I share some of our stories with younger couples in our church.
Right.
Yeah. When we say that we don't prescribe that this is the way you should be handling things, but it so far has worked for us, and we just want to share that with you. That there's possibility of how you deal with your finances as husband and wife. Right?
We should interview your wife one day and ask about her money beliefs. And
I can pass a message to her. Yeah, she has very clear views of how to deal with money, and she is the one who articulates some of these kind of habits to
Right.
my children, my three boys. Yeah.
Right. So being conservative, I mean, I'm hearing you say that about yourself, which in a way came from your parents, being frugal and prudent, right? These are some of the things that you also grew up with. So with all these things that you have sort of received from your parents, that you have learned from your parents, are you confident now in the way you manage your money? Because I hear that you passed your money to your wife. Does that mean that your wife handles the investments, the savings, and all that, and you don't do it at all?
No, actually, my wife will tell you that whatever I ask for, I get.
Okay.
Yeah, she will. And so
You can
far,
say that again 10 times. So that's very important. The earlier part you cannot say, but this one you can repeat 10 times. Very important for us, man.
Yeah.
Whatever you ask from your wife, you get.
Okay, you all take it as you wish. But that is our relationship in relation to money. Of course, if it's a big item, she will have a big say in it, because I think she makes. I tend to overspend sometimes. I tend to be less afraid of spending money, and she is more of a saver.
What are some examples of big items, like you mentioned, buying a house, buying a car?
Buying a house and buying a car is always a joint decision.
Okay.
Not that we have bought many houses, but say for example, it was a very painful lesson more than 10 years back, when I said, hey, we cannot keep the money, just the bank and give you the how many percent deposit rate, and recently it's like less than 1% kind of thingy, right? So we must make the money work for us. So we buy stocks, but I know how to buy, I don't know how to sell. So when the market turned, we will get stuck.
Okay.
And when we liquidate, actually those were very bad decisions for me.
Okay, so you make those decisions and
I
you
make the
convince your
decisions.
wife that you should invest some money, but then in the end it turned out to be a pretty bad decision.
Yes, there have been many bad decisions.
Yeah, so I want to talk more about that later on,
Sure.
because I do want to find out, besides these so-called bad decisions, I think it's very helpful to know that lawyers are very smart, but they do make bad decisions.
Definitely.
Occasionally. But you mentioned that, well, whatever you get or whatever you ask from your wife, you get, and you all discuss with regard to big decisions. So when you make these decisions with your wife, are you the more confident person, or your wife is the one that says, no, I'm very confident it's going to be like that?
Usually she defers the final decision to me
you.
in relation to things dealing with finance and money.
I see.
Yeah.
So are you confident in terms of managing your own money?
Saving the money, I leave it to her. I think I'm more confident. She was screw away. No, I don't want you to spend on this. And she has been precious to me, to us, I think, as a family, in relation to being the gatekeeper to our income. So I think God puts us together for a purpose. Can you imagine if both of us are so frugal and don't know how to, or don't want to use the money? I don't know whether we can really enjoy the fruits
you wouldn't
of
enjoy
our money.
your life as
Or
well.
if both of us keep spending, all right, and then beyond our means, and then we don't have savings, that would be disastrous as well, right? I know of friends who over leverage and got into big trouble, and they're lawyers. They might be very good lawyers to their clients, but when it comes to finances, maybe either they make bad decisions on their own, or they have bad advisors, right? So whatever it is, at the end of the day, it is important to have good counsel. And in relation to finance, I think I see my wife as part of this group of people who provide counsel in relation to the use of money. Yeah. So,
but on your own, if you don't speak to anyone, you say counsel, and after receiving counsel, after receiving advice, after whatever your wife tells you, and of course you said she defers that decision to you, when you make them, are you generally confident that, I'm making a good decision based on whatever I've heard?
You use the term based on whatever I heard. Those bad decisions that I made about just following the trend and just going in and buying, I think I probably, as I reflect on some of the questions that you have posed to me, I think I made those decisions on my own. And if there were good counsel at that point, no, actually it's not quite right, because I do have brokers, right, when I buy and sell shares. But at that point of time, I said, hey, buy this. And then they will say, okay, I will execute the trade for you. I did not receive counsel.
They basically took orders and then they execute your orders. They didn't.
Yeah. But I think the way I manage this part of the finances now, I do have I think a good broker who's able to come and tell me, Suchai, no, this one I don't think is a good idea.
That's good. Right? Okay.
Or say, hey, Suchai, I'm thinking of this. And sometimes I do take his lead.
Right.
And sometimes I don't.
Right.
So the decision ultimately is on me.
Right.
But there is somebody who will come to me or whom I will ask, I'm able to approach to ask, hey, is this a good decision?
Right.
I think over the last few years when I decided to put aside a sum of money, Mel and I say, okay, look, if we manage ourselves, number one, I got no time to look at it. Number two, I don't have the time to be able to consider whether this stock, I do mainly equity, it makes sense or not. And if you want to be a bit more aggressive to get returns, then you really need to study the stock a little bit better rather than just following the trend.
That's right.
Right. So I can share some of my thoughts and how it developed over a period of time in relation to in relation to Bitcoin, actually.
Okay.
If you have the time, I can share some thoughts on that.
Please go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead if you want to share about Bitcoin.
Oh, so I remember when I was in Hong Kong, I think for a conference, and we were sitting. Now that you mention, it's very vivid in my mind how that on the episode we were just standing around, mingling around, and Bitcoin I think at that point of time was about $4,000.
Okay,
and it was standing, not sitting at one of these cocktail tables, and there are four of us. I think 3 or 4 of us. They're talking about $4,000. I said, okay, $4,000. Maybe I should just play around with it. Do 5 pieces. 20 of 1,000, one for me, one for my wife, and one for each of my children, each of my 3 sons. And came back, we spoke to somebody, or I spoke to somebody, and said, no lah, speculative and all. In the end, work also overcame that thought never happened. I did not buy that 5 Bitcoin. Then it went to $9,000. Oh, shucks. Then it went to 19 of 1,000 at that point of time. I think 19 of 1,000. Oh, double shucks. And then it came down to 11,000. Wow, heng. Right? Then it went up to 60 over 1,000. But by then, I also became a lesson for me. Hey, look, you follow the trend. You don't do it properly, or you go in at the wrong time, you're going to get terribly burnt, And then we went at 60 over 1,000, right? Then it went down to, I think, below 30.
I've lost touch with it already. I still have Bitcoin in my own personal investment portfolio, but very, very small. I really just buy it for fun.
But I wish I had bought the 4,000.
Well, I wish I had bought it when it was $100.
Yeah, that's true. They say you can buy a McDonald's, is it, with 1 Bitcoin? Those were. But so the lesson for me is, with hindsight, you are always correct.
Yeah, and you can buy it, but your emotions probably go up and down with the Bitcoin prices going up and down as well. So you mentioned that more than 10 years ago, you made some mistakes with regard to stock investments. Were there any other big financial mistakes you made all these years?
No lah, I think no. I'm quite conservative in this also.
Came from your father?
Maybe a bit gassy even. I told my mom, I said, wow, if I was a bit more garang, imagine 1993, when I first started out as practice on my own, I became a lawyer in 1990, but I came out on my own and started my own practice in 1993. At that time was the stock market run and the
roaring
run.
90s. Yeah.
And then I had to do, of course, real estate convincing, right? And I've got some clients who are property investors, and they would get I bring them to the developer's office. They get an option, and within don't know how many weeks, they flip the option and make so much money. But I didn't dare to do that for some reason. I don't know why. Then you hear of sad stories where I got friends who went into this, over leverage, and then when the 1996, the property market cooled down with the first set, after the first set of cooling measures, the banks came calling and became bankrupt. So who is right, who is wrong? Sometimes I am not very sure. But I think if you want to do it on your own, sometimes the propensity to make the wrong decisions is higher than if you, at least in terms of financial matters,
right?
Instead of having somebody who is reliable, whom you can talk to. Yeah.
So do you have anyone? I mean, when you are making your decisions, besides
my current broker, I'm quite happy with him.
Okay.
I think he's not the very garang type, and he's not also the one who's too conservative. I tell him, hey, I don't want this money to be sitting in the bank and doing nothing. I want to have enough. I want to earn something that can pay for my holidays each year.
Right.
I don't go for very expensive holidays, okay? But I just don't want, I think it doesn't make sense to eat into your principal when there might be something else you can do.
Right.
So
besides your broker, anyone else?
Not really.
Help you
my wife will be the restraining force.
But your wife, does she do any investments? She doesn't, right? She saves.
She's more a saver.
Okay. So since you talk about having someone like your broker to help you advise, what would you consider to be good advice generally, not just from your broker, but what would you, and especially you're in the business of giving advice, right, to your clients, right? So using your experience as a lawyer for decades and the advice you've gotten from your broker, what would you then consider to be good advice?
Good advice will only be given by good advisors. So I think the first thing I look for is a good advisor.
Okay.
And what would, to me, be a good advisor? I think somebody whom I believe to be competent, somebody whom I believe to know my needs, sometimes even somebody who is able to articulate what my needs should be, and then will be able to provide options to me on what can be done to meet those objectives and aims or needs that I may have. And then not be afraid to give recommendations. And I like an advisor or counselor who is able to tell me what they would do in my situation. To me, that last bit is quite important. I remember I was with my father in the hospital, and the doctor, it was a geriatrics lawyer, a doctor who came to me and said that if this was my father, I would not go through this treatment. When actually another surgeon recommended a particular treatment.
I see.
So to me, that doctor gave me good counsel.
In a way, he had that confidence to tell you that, because not many advisors, so-called, will do that, right? He'll just tell you the standard answer.
That's right.
Right?
So, any stop at I give you options, right? But I think a good advisor would be one who will be able to say, given your situation, given your objectives, given if I were in your position, these are the possible options. And if I were in your position, I will probably take either, you will narrow down all the options for me and enable and allow me to make a very considered decision.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you, and if I may sort of like summarize whatever you have said over the last few minutes, right? The couple of minutes that you talk about what is considered a good advice. You started by saying that good advice comes from good advisors. And your definition of a good advisor is someone who is competent. And at the same time, you alluded to courageous. Because this advisor, because he's competent, he's able to offer that advice, give you the option. But besides that, he has that courage to take a certain position.
Yes.
Right? Otherwise, it's like, I give you A to Z, and then it's your choice.
Your choice, yeah.
Right? But the advisor is courageous, or that doctor specifically is courageous enough to tell you that, look, if I were you, I wouldn't do this. But it's really up to you. But if I were you, I wouldn't do this. So he is competent, but at the same time, he's brave enough to tell you his position. And because of that, somehow he has an authority. When he speaks with authority. And a good advisor is also someone who will probably intimately know your situation.
Yes.
So that he's able to take that position for you.
Yes.
Would I be right to say that?
I think you've summarized it very nicely. Those thoughts and articulate it, package it much more nicely than I have. As a lawyer, I have to do that. I don't appreciate on the one hand, on the other hand kind of lawyers. And I say that if that doctor told me, on the one hand, you can go for surgery, but on the other hand, you can also not go for surgery, I think I'll be very lost. Right? My view is that when we are in a position of being an advisor, we need to take a position. Whether you are a legal advisor or financial advisor. And I do appreciate my current broker would tell me, Suchai, given your objectives, I don't think this is a good decision to make.
Right. So in this world, of AI, right? Everybody is talking about AI replacing human beings, and people are talking about even AI replacing advisors. I thought what you have just shared in a way dispel that possibility, because for good advice to happen, this person must have that authority over your life in that area and intimately know you. I'm not sure whether a computer can intimately know how you feel, right? And so AI advisor is going to be tough to be able to do that. But all that intimacy and the authority comes from the advisor's competence, technical competence, but also courage. I'm not sure whether a computer can be courageous.
I think that part of it, at this moment, I see and I hope that AI will not be able to replace, because I think that's a human bit of it.
Yes.
But when it comes to competence, I think the advisors must be prepared to harness the powers of AI to put together information and options to the client.
Right.
And then for the advisor to analyze this and say, hey, look, what do you really need? And I know in the legal profession, I think we're also struggling with how AI is going to impact us. And there are some of us who will say, no worries, lawyers, there's this human element. But I gave the analogy, and I don't know whether it applies to the financial professionals. A solution involves step 1 to step 100. A legal solution, step 1 to... If step 1 to say 90 can be done better by harnessing the technology with artificial intelligence, and only the 91st step to the 100th step require that so-called human touch. If as a lawyer, I'm providing only the first to the 90 step kind of thing, then I'm going to be irrelevant.
Right.
Because AI is going to take over.
Right.
So lawyering skills now must be, I suppose the work, certain parts of the lawyering skill must now be developed more deliberately.
Yeah.
Right?
I do agree with you.
You give advice. Yeah.
I do agree with you. I mean, I always say that, to beat technology, be human. The more human you are, the less technology will be able to beat you. Of course, there are certain things that, will be easily replaced by technology, right?
Yes.
A lot of technical knowledge can be replaced by technology easily.
Yes.
I don't think we can beat technology in that regard. I mean, you go and search, you go and type into ChatGPT or whatever, the technology is going to provide you with the technical answer much faster.
Yes.
But it's a human aspect. It's not just what you say, but how you say that differentiate a good advisor and a bad advisor, right? I always say that the difference between a good doctor and a bad doctor is their bedside manners, right? The bedside manner is very important because it gives the patients that assurance, which tech may not be able to do it.
Yeah.
So I think it applies the same to not just lawyering, but as well as in our profession of giving wealth advice. So if you think that, advice is good, or you have sort of helped us define what is good advice, would you then consider pay for advice?
I think you must, right?
And specifically, Suchai, just to be clear, I refer to wealth advice, right? Because in the legal world, it's understood. You go see a lawyer, you're not going to get free advice. You got to pay them, right? But in my world, especially over the past few decades, people are not used to paying for wealth advice because they get it quote unquote free.
Free, yeah. Because it's always bundled with products, right? I'm trying to sell you a product.
Right. Yeah. So what do you think? If a financial professional is able to give you good advice, do you think that you would pay for good advice?
Personally, I say yes, you have no choice. But maybe I can say because my position as a lawyer, because I think you must pay for good advice, whether it's professional advice. You do bargain with your doctor. You don't, right? And you expect to pay for advice given to you by a doctor. When you pay a doctor, if he tells you, "Oh, I don't have a problem," will you not pay for the doctor? You will still pay for the doctor. In fact, you'll be very happy. "Oh, thank you for telling me I have no problem." You're not going to say, "Hey, well,
no problem.
I pay you, how come you never tell me that I have a problem?" You're not going to do that, right? So I think in the financial profession and the industry, for as long as I know, it's always been packed with selling a product.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think the industry probably has evolved into a certain way, such that maybe clients' expectation, customers' expectation is that, why should I pay for advice? But I think you get what you paid for.
Right. Yeah.
If you want honest, I'm not saying people who sell products are not honest or anything like this, but I would like to say that when you take the position as an advisor or counselor, there is an independence which you must exercise. And sometimes if your business or is structured in such a way that that independence will be compromised, then it's quite natural for clients to say, "I'm not going to pay for it."
Right.
I mean, I shared with you what prompted me to contact you.
Right.
I think some time back.
Right.
It was through a Business Times article,
right,
which I read, which you penned, and you wrote that trust is not always the solution, and universal life is not always the solution. And I looked at it and said, "Hey, this is a wealth planner who says all these things. Very interesting." And that's when I emailed you.
Right.
And that's how we got to know each other. Yeah. And I think that what came about, or the impression that I got from there is, hey, this fella is not selling products. And it's in alignment with how I perceive my role as a lawyer.
Right.
I'm supposed to be fearless. I'm supposed to be competent. I'm supposed to look after my client's best interests. To me, that is what I strive to be as to being a good lawyer. What you mentioned resonated with me. Yeah.
I guess
so will I pay for advice? Yes, I think you have to pay for good advice.
Yeah, I guess in my industry, the problem is that many people associate wealth advice or financial advice to selling of a product, like you have mentioned. And if that's the case, then the value of advice is not there. If it's just for the purpose of transacting a product, the value of advice is not there. And as a result of that, many Singaporeans, and not just Singaporeans, people all over the world, when they think about paying for financial advice, they would say, no, I mean, why should I pay for just a transaction, right? But unfortunately, that really is not good wealth advice, right? We talk about good wealth advice. It's not just about knowing intimately about a person's need and prescribing a product, because I think if that is wealth advice, we will be easily replaced by AI, like what we have spoken about, right? But good advice is really about intimately knowing a person's, beyond their financial needs, their life needs, their aspirations, their value towards money, knowing the money beliefs that you grow up with, right? Knowing your money values. Because when I know how you grow up in an environment like what you have shared about your family, and I hear you talking about your bad experiences with investing 10 years ago, because I intimately know your situation, I know your psychology, the wealth plan will look very different beyond just prescribing a product, right? And if an advisor can do that for you, well, then I suppose there's value in the advice. You will be more prepared to pay for value, right? But if I'm just here and I tell you, okay, Suchai, I think based on what you tell me, okay, I'm going to sell you an insurance product, I'm going to sell you an investment product, then the value is not really there, because you can go out there and many people can do that same job for you and do it for free, right? Then it's not worth paying.
Yeah, but the perception of the client is important.
Yes, it is.
The perception of the client that the advisor is there for his interest.
That's right.
And I'm prepared to trust what he says.
Right.
I think that is important. And I suppose for many of the financial advisors outside who are selling products and services, many times I believe they would have given good advice in any case. But because it becomes, it is bundled with something else, so they are perceived as they may not be perceived as being
independent.
They are not perceived as not being trustworthy, because clients may be perceiving them as trying to sell them a product.
Right.
So I think a lot has to do with the perception.
Right.
So I think that to be an independent advisor, you really may have no choice but to have to choose what how you want to position the service that you're providing.
Right.
I make no judgment whether that you shouldn't be selling products and all, because each of us have our own role. Right. The client sometimes need to need their product.
Right.
I have great respect for insurance agents, because many of them do have the client at heart, and in selling products. But of course, there are bad hats as well.
Of course. In every industry, there will always be that black sheep.
So what I suppose I'm saying is that sometimes to be in a position to see your advice being appreciated, the clients must trust you, must perceive you as all the things that I mentioned. I just want to put it out there in case I may have given the wrong perception that, all those people selling products cannot be good advisors.
Yeah.
I'm sure many of them have the welfare of clients at heart.
For sure. Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting you brought up the word trust, because that brings to mind a formula that was given by this author of the book called Trusted Advisor. His name is David Meister, and he said, how do you build trust? And he gave a trust formula, and the trust formula is CRI divided by SI, which is credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-interest. Right? So it's a very interesting formula, because if you want to build trust, whether in the legal practice or in my practice, right? So you have to up your credibility.
Yes.
And credibility comes from your education, your competence, your technical competence. You got to up your reliability.
Yeah.
You do what you say, and you say what you do.
Yes.
Reliability.
Yes.
If you say you will do it, you do it.
Yes.
Right? That's reliability. Plus intimacy, which we talked about earlier.
Yes.
You need to intimately know your clients, divided by self-interest. The higher your self-interest, the more conflicted you are. The more conflicted you are, it lowers trust. Right? So David Masters say that to build trust is CRI divided by SI, credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-interest. And we can work on this few variable, then our trust or clients will trust us more.
Yeah, I will share that with my colleagues.
Okay. it's not for me anyway.
I haven't read that book. But it's a simple formula to follow. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I guess that's what we have for today. And I just want to thank you very much for sharing with us your view on the value of advice, especially coming from the perspective of a lawyer. I mean, so far we have been doing this series with various people, but this is the first time we are asking someone whom really give advice on a day-to-day basis, right? So we just want to thank you for coming in to share with us your perspective of what you think the value of advice should be. So thank you very much, Suchai.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for having me.
So for the rest of us, I hope you have benefited from this episode. If you feel that you want to continue to hear more, please follow us on our podcast, whether through YouTube, through Spotify, the various platforms. And please help us to like and share as well. Thank you very much for listening to us. All analyses, views, or opinions from interviews, recommendations, and other information broadcasted, podcasted, or published herein are provided for general information purposes only. Information expressed does not take into account any specific situation, particular needs, or objectives, and should not be construed as specific advice or a recommendation. Information has been obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action. Provident Limited does not accept any liability for any loss whatsoever arising from any use of the information broadcasted, podcasted, or published herein. All contents and information contained herein may not be copied or reproduced in whole or in part by any means without prior written consent of Provident Limited.